And first, I will ask you all one by one to make a small talk for up to 10 minutes to tell you about your personal understanding of cultural diversity, and then we will continue with the discussion. Agnese, would you like to start? You can stand or
go. Of course. Hello. Honored to be here. I have prepared a couple of slides. How does this work? I just haven't. Okay, we go. This is not the most important one. Let's go to
we want to know about you as well.
Okay. Yeah, well, as presented, I'm head of diversity and inclusion practice for Baltics in PricewaterhouseCoopers, Latvia, but my background is social anthropology. I'm just trying to get to the next slide, but somehow it doesn't move. Yes. And so when talking about interaction, people who are interacting, I'm also using my anthropological perspective. And I'm also internationally certified diversity manager. Have been working with diversity management in different organizations as consultant and practitioner, and also as a researcher for many years now, focusing both on Nordic organizations. Have been actually living and working and studying in Norway for 15 years. Have been doing research also in Middle East, and I also have a sufficient background, of course, from Latvia. So what I want to do first is maybe to broaden and also challenge the concept of diversity. And I would say that diversity, it's not a choice, it's a reality. And we as human beings have always been diverse. It's nothing new. Also, I don't understand Estonian, but I understood that also Estonian Minister of Culture had the same point. Of course, we have always been diverse. And in order to discuss how to deal with diversity, we have to first look at the data. We have to understand the context in which we live, and it applies both organizational level and on national level. So first, let's understand the context. That diversity is a reality. So first, if we look at EU population, we see that society is aging, and that is in many ways a threat to our societies. Average age of European Union citizen is 45 years, which is quite high. And we also see that the share of people 65 plus is expected to rise from 14% in 2000 and to 25% by 2040. So it means that by 2040 there will be equal number of those 65 plus and those under 25. We also see that multi-generational working places are inevitable. It's quite possible that in one working place there can be even up to 5 generations, if we think now of how we call all these generations on social media, silent generation, baby boomers, alpha generation, and so on and so forth. So we can face a workplace with up to 5 generations simultaneously, and that is a big challenge when it comes to diversity management. We see also that EU population has grown last 20 years, but if we look at the Baltics, for example, Latvia and Lithuania, in Latvia and Lithuania population has dropped by 18 or 17%, and which is the largest relative decline in EU. And all Baltic countries and also Estonia are amongst the least populous nations in the European Union. So basically, our market is shrinking, human resources are shrinking in numbers, and this is a huge challenge that we face not only in a labor market, but also when it comes to social services and sustainability, social sustainability in our countries. We also see significant changes in family structures. We have fewer marriages. We have also births occur later. These numbers of births are going down, and we see that births to women in age 40 plus actually are doubling since 2002 to 2022. So we see also significant changes in family structures, also more and more solo parents raising children alone. We see also when it comes to differences between genders, if we look at men and women, then in European Union we see that there are 5% more women than men. Unfortunately, it does not reflect positions on top managements. But if you look at Latvia, their leading statistics, there are 16% more women than men. At the same time, males in Latvia has the lowest life expectancy in EU. So also these are, significant aspects to take into consideration. Talking about diversity, 1 in 5 in the European Union have neurodiversity. 1 in 4 has a disability. The workforce numbers are declining, and there are prognoses that by 2050 there will be a decline by 16 million employees in EU. It means that the total number of employees in EU is shrinking by 16 million from 246 million in year 2020 to 230 million by year 2050. It means that amount of employees is shrinking dramatically. So we have to think what to do about it in terms of finding people, giving opportunity for people to work and in different sectors, also looking at social groups which have been discriminated so far, and looking at people in whom we have not seen value for one or another reason. And then we also see, of course, that international immigration is growing. There has been 7 million immigrants to the European Union in 2022, more than 5 million from non-EU countries, and more than 13 million EU citizens live abroad within the EU. So it means that also internally in EU there is a lot of internal immigration, and we also see that the share of children born to foreign-born mothers are increasing. It means that when we talk about cultural diversities or national or ethnic diversities, it's not a simple question anymore. Who are you if you have parents from different nationalities? I'm Latvian, but I have spent 15 years of my life living and working in Norway, and that has perhaps impacted my perception of ethnicity and values even more than growing up in Soviet Union. So what is ethnic diversity? What is national diversity? What is cultural diversity? These are questions that we should challenge. And we also see a big differences between rural and urban contexts. We see that fertility is much, much higher in rural regions. At the same time, we see that in rural regions there are no working places. And we see that employment is possible in urban places. It means that there is a lot of movements between urban and rural territories, or between rural and urban, and it is also a significant aspect of diversity. How do we integrate? How do we cooperate? How do we include? How do we promote the feeling of belonging when we talk about rural versus urban? And these differences can be even more significant than having different national cultures. So let's move to my second slide, which is about diversity and democracy. So first slide was about what diversity actually is. It's not only culture. Culture is never homogeneous. Culture is never static. Culture is always, ethnic culture is nothing that defines us alone. I mean, the fact that I'm Latvian does not impact how I perform my duties at work. My identity is much more comprehensive, much more richer than that. So diversity and democracy, those concepts are very closely related, and both require inclusion, representation, and respect for differences. So while these concepts are distinct, their interplay really contributes to well-being and functioning of societies. And I want to highlight my main points actually by this very simple drawing, which is found on Google, on Twitter. You can see the source. I have not drawn it, but I think it explains a lot of things in a simple way. If you look at the first picture, which is called reality, we cannot ignore the fact that people are not born equal, and there are huge structural inequalities. So if we say that gender doesn't matter, if we say that skin color doesn't matter, what we say is that we actually don't understand structural inequalities. So as a diversity manager, I used to say, if you are power blind, if you are gender blind, if you are gender blind, if you are color blind, then we are also power blind. We do not understand structural inequalities and how it influences our everyday, walk of life, how we feel in labor market and so on and so forth. So in reality, some people has all too much than they need. Some people have the basic needs covered, and some people do not have enough at all. Then we have had an idea that, well, equality is the goal that we have to strive to. And if you look at this picture, which is called equality, you see that the equal or similar approach to everyone actually does not work. We have to recognize individual needs. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we actually talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because diversity is a fact, we are all diverse. And in order for people to feel included, we need to treat them in a way that resembles equity. We need to recognize individual needs. And for example, if we look at organizational context, you may ask in this picture, which is called equality, this guy who is the shortest one, why isn't he performing? You know, we treat everyone the same way, and you see exactly that he's not able to perform in this way. He needs some adaptations. And in order, and we are all interested in having productive and motivated people who feel belonging, who feel valued and important. And these guys in the picture of equality, who feels belonging, who feels included, who feels able to follow the game, is only actually the tallest one. If you look at equities, then this picture looks a little bit better because you see that individual needs are recognized and everyone can watch the game. But at the end of the day, if you look at if you remove the fence, then you don't need these adaptations. And if you look at the last picture, which is called inclusion, then you actually see what inclusion is about. But very often we talk about diversity, we count the genders, we count nationalities, but we forget about including them. We forget about equity, we forget about inclusion. That is the main part. And just briefly, so what connects diversity with democracy? First of all, inclusive representation. Democracy is about hearing, you have to listen to diverse voices of society. Societies have always been diverse, people have always been diverse, and democracy is about representing everyone's needs through elected representatives. So, and also diversity. It is about inclusive representation. Diversity is a number, but if we want to have value out of it, it needs to be included. Participation, equity, equality. Again, these are basic concepts both for diversity and for democracy. We need to think in terms of equity in order to ensure equal opportunities. And without participation, it's not possible. Culture or intersectionality, I briefly made that point in my previous slide. Well, national or ethnic culture is nothing homogeneous. It's changing all the time. I'm not only defined by the fact that I'm Latvian. I'm also a woman, I'm also a mother, I also have education, I also have background, I belong to specific maybe social class or networks and so on and so forth. So that is what is intersectionality. It's synergies of different identity dimensions that forms us as human beings. So the fact that I'm Latvian does not influence how I work, how I make friendships, how I, for example, fall in love, or how I trust or don't trust institutions. It's a huge amount of experiences, perspectives, dimensions of my identities that influence how I perform. It's not my nationality. And in defining diversity, just as, let's say, cultural diversity, actually we enforce stereotypes about specific cultures. And as a diversity manager, I have received questions many times, okay, how do we work, for example, with Norwegians or with Indians or with Ukrainians? You can't provide instruction how to work with Norwegian. It's the same way as you can't provide instruction how to work with Latvian. If I would ask you how to work with Estonians, would you provide an instruction? It's not a washing machine. It's a person with a large scope of identity dimensions. So we should not look in so narrow terms of what culture is. Culture is our way of thinking and acting, which is based on all previous experiences that we have had in our lives. And just to make a point here about minorities, we know that minorities do navigate differently in organization, in society, and that's why we really need to focus on diversity competence rather than diversity in numbers, but diversity competence. And diversity competence is how we understand power relations. We have to be aware of power relations in society and organization. We have to be aware of biases, prejudices, stereotypes, and how they influence our decision making, how they influence how we form relationships. We have to be aware of privileges And we have to be able to see the value of diversity. And the role we want diversity to play, and these are all fundamental aspects of diversity competence. Then, if we want innovation, competitiveness, and social sustainability, again, we need to see diversity as a value rather than a threat. And democratic framework helps us to unlock the potential of diversity, because when we listen to other voices, when we listen to other perspectives, when we take them into considerance, then we can innovate, then you can grow our competitiveness, and we can secure social sustainability. And there are, of course, several normative frameworks and new directives requesting us to focus on social sustainability. We can talk about CSRD, ESG, all these concepts, which sounds very complicated. But what is the most simple definition of social sustainability? It is how we treat people. And how we treat people, it defines how competitive in long term we are. Human rights, social justice. Can you imagine democracy without human rights, without social justice? In-group and out-group dynamics. We can refer to several social theories, some psychological and cognitive theories that, of course, we tend to to like people who are like us. But it's not always because that we admire ourselves, but we somehow unconsciously look for the reflections of our normality. We feel safer, we feel in comfort zone when we navigate in similar environments that we represent ourselves, but at the same time we have to encourage, we have to be curious, we have to be open to diverse perspective, because with only one perspective, with only homogeneous approach, you cannot be competitive and sustainable in the current world. Media, information, communication, I assume that we will keep on talking about it. And of course, media, information, channel, communication, it's a huge responsibility how we talk about otherness, how we construct otherness. Diversity management always starts with ourselves, how we see the world. It's not, it doesn't start with managing other cultures. It's about our worldview. Why do we perceive someone as a threat? Why are we afraid of differences? Why are not we open to other viewpoints? Why our worldview is limited in specific ways? And then how media deals with it. Are media reinforcing differences, exaggerating differences, and in that way polarizing society, focusing more on conflicts than on peaceful discussions? These are, of course, questions that should be addressed. And my last point, polarization, I would say that, and we will get back to it during discussion, I'm more than sure about it, that polarization is what happens when diversity management does not work, when you have not done your homework, and because diversity management is not an anarchy. There are specific competencies, specific homeworks that has to be done, specific awareness, understanding, insights, structures, also legal frameworks that needs to be in place in order to promote inclusion and belonging. So polarization is what happens when this homework is not done, and when people are not included, and when diversity is not managed and not understood. So that was a brief, or maybe not so brief, introduction from me.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Agnese. And we will continue, but I just want to remind you that you can use Slido to ask questions. So I will incorporate these in the discussion later. So Slido, and use hashtag INSA. Dmitri, would you continue and have your brief introduction?
Thank you. No, I don't. I'm actually tempted to provide you kind of guiding manual how to work with Estonians, but well, I actually was about to congratulate you with the November sun, but then they closed the windows. So we are now using basically our November quarter for the sun, so you can look out of that window. Well,
after the conference.
Yeah, I mean, of course it depends on us, because we are here to entertain you. And yeah, after so brilliant presentation, what I have to add, well, my background is defense and security. And obviously I am here to be a bit more pessimistic than other speakers. And well, if you look at diversity through the prism of social resilience, then of course this phenomenon, diversity, has at least two sides. One side of the course, and why you need resilience. And of course, if everybody is happy and your society is wealthy and healthy, and you live at peacetime, then nobody remembers resilience. But then if you are at crisis, well, especially at multifaceted crisis, prolonged and continued crisis we are now living in, then of course everybody reminds that, oh, we must be resilient, and then you speak about different characteristics of resilience. And resilience is being tested at crisis, and then we can see now also in our societies, but of course in Ukraine, a country at war. So what we can learn from them, and what we can do here, that preparedness matters. And diversity could be considered through the prism of resilience as actually enabler. The diversity as enabler, because it allows us to choose from multiple solutions at crisis. Because if we are preparing for a previous crisis, then we never succeed, because crisis can surprise you. And in order to solve a crisis, you need to be innovative, you need non-standard solutions, and obviously the more diverse society or group you have, the higher probability then non-standard solution can be found. So in that regard, diversity is an enabler for resilience. Another example could be, let's say, nature. Okay, the more diverse is your pool of genes, at average, the more healthier your human population is. Or the more diverse is your food diet, the more healthy you are as a human being. So no question about that for diversity. But another side of coin for diversity is that actually it could be a challenge for societal resilience at the same time. Because as already mentioned, psychologically, we enjoy being surrounded by similar people, like-minded people, or people we see as appearance similar to us. It's, psychology, because it's in-group belonging. And there are several important components of kind of recipe component and elements for resilience. I just would mention several of them. One is trust. Because without trust, you cannot build a resilient society. And then again, we tend to trust people who are similar to us, naturally. And why we need trust? Because again, during a crisis, in order to solve a rising problem, you need to cooperate with people, especially in societies as we are here, sparsely populated, with limited resources. So basically cooperation is the key how you overcome the crisis. And then for cooperation, obviously you need trust, because otherwise you want to do something together with people you don't trust. And then if you don't trust people who are around you, your neighbors or members of your community, or people who live in the same society, that obviously you are trouble of solving crisis. Another component of resilience is empathy. Because if there's no empathy, then obviously you won't help people who are at crisis and who might be, let's say, more vulnerable. That impact of a crisis is more harsher than them. Without empathy, you obviously won't go to help them. And then again, naturally, we tend to trust and to show our empathy to people who are more similar, I don't know, culturally, linguistically, ethnically, or on whatever characteristics we take. Well, the good news is that actually trust can be cultivated. And that's also a measure of crisis preparedness. And that is my message, that in order to prepare for the next crisis, you must invest also into trust-building activities between different societal groups, whatever they are. Again, they might be as diverse as possible. We are not talking just about ethnicity here, but also its age, its, of course, gender, its geography, or on whatever characteristics. But trust-building activities as a crisis preparedness measure is very important. Otherwise, when crisis happens, obviously it's not too late to do trust-building activities during the crisis. But then, of course, it will cost you much more. It will come with a higher price than if you're basically building trust between different groups while you're solving the crisis, as we are doing now in my country here. So that's my suggestion for our politicians and the government. Unfortunately, they already left here, but anyway, they can see us on the web. That during the crisis time, another innovative solution to introduce diversity tax. Who is going to pay a higher price while building trust during a crisis? So we need a diversity tax in order to stimulate integration and diversity. The last one was a joke. I know that we are already tired of various new taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmitri. And okay, you can applaud, of course. And Dainius, Babilas, then do you have this diversity tax in Latvia? Lithuania, sorry.
Hello. Yeah, and well, still not yet, but hopefully, why not? It's a good idea. Actually, I'm very pleased that today we started to discuss about the cultural diversity, about democracy and state policy and the connections between them. And I'm very pleased that we have different approaches in that, and we started with the different approaches. And well, there is no one perspective on that's for sure. So that's why we should discuss from the different perspectives. When I start talking about the cultural diversity and democracy and state policy, so at the moment it's very difficult for me to talk about the current news from Lithuania, and I even changed my points and highlights of the speech because the Lithuanian national minority law is on the stage now. It's still on the ending phase, and the parliament exactly 1 week ago on November 7 adopted the new law on national minorities, and now we're still waiting for the last signature from the president, which will probably happen today or tomorrow. So it's very important, and it's very close connected to the cultural diversity and democracy as well. I would like to illustrate my talk on experience from the long period and experience of the state, and also my personal experience from the last 20 years. First of all, I want to take us all back 35 years ago to the singing revolution time when all the Baltic states evolved as independent countries. And to me, it's a very good period and a very good example how democracy and cultural diversity affects each other and how it goes in parallel. And how it's connected. During the restoration of the state, so the national minorities NGOs became active. They were established. The cultural life of national minorities based on preserved identity was revived. Many processes took place in parallel, and it happened that the current law of the national minorities, it appeared faster than the independence of Lithuania. So because it was adopted on 1889, and the Department of National Minorities, which was called at the time the Department of Nationalities, was created and was built. And only after that, the Lithuania got the independence. And this law was, at that moment, it was the first such document, not just in Lithuania, but probably in whole Europe, which was adopted on the state level. And there was very clear understanding that the state and the democracy will not be effective without the clear understanding and the clear structure of the cultural diversity, and how can it take it to the agenda of the new young state. To this issue, the main leaders of the state, it was the period when the first proactive leaders gave a lot of attention to the diversity, to the NGOs of the national minorities. And it was so important to give the clear message that all those people with various cultural and national background, they are involved in the Lithuanian state. And actually it was a very safe approach for the Lithuania as the 85% of Lithuanian citizens, they were Lithuanians, and just 15% were declared as the national minorities. And the Department of National Minorities, that current department, it started to operate under the Council of Ministers, and it has no special building at the time. It has no places to gather the people which were involved. And even nowadays we're still kind of joking that the national policy on diversity and national minorities, it started in the kitchen. And it's very symbolic for us that it was the place where the porridge was cooked and boiled, and at the same time the first documents of national diversity appeared, and it is actually the place where we have lots of ingredients, and when we have lots of ingredients, so we can make it that result, and then. The whole period, 35 years of independence, so it can be divided to some parts. And the first part was for the 20 years until 2010, and it was the period when everything was kind of growing because of the enthusiasm, because of a will to make much more for the cultural diversity. Many organizations appeared. The special structure of national minority centers appeared in Lithuania. There are lots of funds. The leaders were included in various important organizations, for example, like the representative of national minorities in the Council of Culture of Lithuania, which is the most important organization for dividing the budget for culture in Lithuania. So it was a special status for national minorities to have the representative there. This was the period when the state actually regulated the diversity a lot. Was it democratic? Well, I think yes, because the NGOs they make their opinion a lot, and we were active in building and evolving the policy. But after those 20 years, the next stage began, because the law which was adapted during the Soviet Union times, because it was just before the independence, so it ended, and there was growing understanding at that moment that it's kind of enough to have the state policy on national minorities, and it's kind of more idea that now it should evolve somehow by itself. This was the time when, for the almost 14 years, we had no law. The Department of National Minorities was deconstructed, and all the topics and files were divided between the various ministries, and we lost clear state policy on that. But it was a kind of thinking that, well, we are strong enough to build that and to proceed that, and it's already enough. Basically, some plans and ideas was kind of good, but in general, we lost a lot in that period, in this kind of sense. And just recently, when it was investigated that the discrimination on other people, the trust that my colleague was talking about is decreasing. So it was taken back to the political discussions. It was taken back that we should regulate this part of the policy much more, and it lasted for many years. And it was so many discussions between liberals and conservative parties and social democrats. And finally, somehow we succeeded just this year, and just last week, as I said, the parliament approved the law just by one vote, and not even by vote which was for the law, but by one vote just because of a registered person for voting. So this opportunity was taken not so easy, and it even was voted by the parties which will be not in the coalition for the next 4 years, as the parliament elections just finished in Lithuania. So we still have kind of challenges on that, but it was a very clear message to 400,000 people that they are a part of the civic society, that they are included, that they are invited to build the country together and to create for its benefit. And what is more very important, that by law it was done to exclude a smaller group of people. And describe them as historical national minorities. So it means just 1% of the whole national minority group. And the description described them as people who don't have their own country, and they have long historical relations with Lithuania. It was done for the Karaites, for Roma people, and for the Tartar community, which is in general Muslim community, but what is also very, very important for us. And they got much more opportunities by law. So it's even a possibility to start some measures and some policies which are specially dedicated for them. And who is the most happier with that? Who is the most happier that the state starting to coordinate the cultural diversity much more than before? So those smaller groups, those little small groups, and they really satisfied with that. They are happy that the state take attention to them. And well, the last probably my questions still are open. Does cultural diversity save democracy, or its opposite? So is democracy saves the cultural diversity? And actually, I always saw it like two ways moving all the time, and a synergy there. But for being effective, so it's the Lithuanian case showed us that it's impossible to do it without a clear and position of the state and the state policy. And when we start thinking that it's somehow going on itself, so it is losing immediately and quite fast, and we are losing what we got during the policies that we got before. So state policy as a catalyst for the connection between diversity and democracy is very important.
Thank you, Dainius. And you can applaud, obviously. And don't forget to ask questions on Slido. Let's start where you finished. Why do different Baltic states have taken so different approaches to minorities? Lithuania, as we heard, is finally having a minorities law. And on the other hand, we have heard that in Latvia, there might be deportations of people who can't speak Latvian language. Dainius, why these different approaches?
Well, so the different approaches are not bad thing in general. So because approach is as good as it is adaptive to the current situation of the state. So I think that regarding the cultural diversity and the policy on national minorities, is different because of its structure, cultural and structure, and the cultural diversity, national diversity that we have. First of all, the biggest minority is Polish community in Lithuania. So even the Poland is a strategic partner of the Lithuania because of the issues that we have in the state safety and defense. So it's always about the equal opportunities to all the people, and we have to take in mind that it's not about the Russian-speaking community. It's not just about the Russian people, but it's also about the other communities. So I think in this case, Lithuania was always more, let's say, Lithuanian state and government. It was always like a more brave in some measures in taking the law into account and shaping the law and everything. So, but it's not probably the example to the other countries. So it can be different.
Dmitri, would you like to add something why Baltic states have had different approaches to minorities?
Well, I leave to my Latvian colleague comment on whatever deportation you mentioned. Right. I think it's also related to the sense of threat perceptions. That I think threat perceptions differed that time in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Obviously, Russian-speaking population in Estonia and Latvia was securitized because we looked at them, and still are, looking at some of them through the prism of security, because you never know whom you could trust. And that's the issue which actually followed all the 30 years of integration here. So it's not just about, let's say, Estonian identity or the language, but it's also about the issue of security. And the challenge here is that it's never a dialogue between majority and minority. There's always, let's say, a third party was present around the table virtually. Of course, the Kremlin with its geopolitical ambitions. And that's how we solved the problem, because it was securitized and different approaches. So, threat perceptions.
Agnese, you are not a politician, so I'm not going to ask about politics directly, but how language policies in Latvia affect the labor market? If you don't speak Latvian, what happens in Latvia with you? Would you still be hired?
Well, it depends where, of course. If you work in state sector and public sector, of course, in order to be able to do your work, you need to know Latvian language. It's the same, I assume, similar as in Estonia. How can you work in public sector and state institution, working with people, with documents, understanding the law if you don't speak national language? And also, well, at least from my experience, also in Nordic countries, I have worked in Norway almost for 15 years. I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't speak Norwegian language. And in Latvia, in private sector, it depends. You can also do your work in private sector if you do not speak national language, which is Latvian. It depends on position, and it depends on your professional sphere, what you are doing. So there is, of course, in order to obtain citizenship, you also need to know Latvian language at least on specific level. Of course, you are not expected to be fluent in Latvian, but there are specific language requirements. But it differs from state sector and public, from state sector and private sector, and there are also jobs which you can do without knowing Latvian in private sector. But again, if you are a member of society, if you are a member of organization, you should understand what people around you talk. You should be able to communicate. But again, at the same time, we see that there is a trend, not only in Latvia, also in Estonia and in Lithuania. We have, for example, these global business centers where local employees in different employees, let's say in Riga, Vilnius, also Tallinn, provide services for foreign markets. There you should then speak, for example, Nordic languages in order to provide services to other markets. So it's very, what I'm saying, it depends. It depends.
What happens in terms of, I'm not saying that you have to explain the law, but we have all read various news and what is actually happening with the language laws in Latvia. Have they changed and are they tough as we have heard?
Well, there is one national language in Latvia and it is Latvian. And well, to be honest, I have not really followed all the changes in language laws in Latvia, but the fact that you need to, there is no changes in national language in Latvia, and there are requirements that you should fulfill in order to participate in labor market, but it depends, as mentioned, whether in public or private sector. And what you mentioned about deportations, well, I cannot really go into detail about that, but again, I'm not, well, Latvia is taking care of minorities, and being a minority or being an, let's say, immigrant or expat or it's not a one-way street. It's always, there are always two ways. I mean, it's a mutual responsibility. Of course, each of us has rights, but we also have responsibilities as members of society, and there should be there some kind of social contract, mutual understanding. What are our common goals? What are our common values? So it's it should be in both directions. And also what you mentioned about trust and also it comes to belonging. I mean, you cannot impose by law that there will be high levels of trust. You cannot impose by laws that no, you have to feel that you belong. It is not possible. It again depends, and both trust and inclusion, it is a relational concept. There need to be at least two, to make this relation work. So you also have some responsibility in order to become and function as a member of society. So this is a general comment, but well, I don't know if I answered your question.
From the audience, Dmitri, they want to know how to build that trust we are talking about. Is there a method?
Well, shared experiences is one of the methods. Basically, those people who share something together, is a tragic experience going through a crisis or a positive experience, doesn't matter, but shared experience is a measure to building trust. I mean, if you survive a crisis together and then if you see that it hits you more or less equally and then you help each other, then of course this is how trust is built. Doing things together, whatever. Learning together.
It doesn't matter what you're doing together, just do some things together.
Yeah. Shared experiences.
Agnese?
Well, I have actually done research on trust, comparing both trust manifestations in Baltics, in Nordic countries, also in Middle East. But we know that Nordic countries are world champions when it comes to social trust. And we see that there are these brilliant synergies, Trust is called Nordic gold, and it means that it promotes happiness, innovations, economic growth, resilience, and strength of democracy, and so on and so forth. Of course, I'm not saying that they don't have challenges. They also have challenges, but the levels of social trust are the highest ones. And one of the reasons behind that is strong, accountable institutions. Strong, accountable institutions, transparency, of course, also communication, of course, also shared experiences. We have to communicate, we have to understand each other, but the backbone is strong institutions and the perception or feelings that the state will take care of you, or at least that the state will do its best to help you. Of course, no, there is probably no state that is ideal. There are always, challenges, but strong institutions, accountable institutions, and I can just give a simple example. For example, especially given our historical background, if you have a challenge, how do you solve it? do you approach a specific person in institutions, or do you trust that the institution will help you no matter who you are? And this is a big difference. Like, I feel that in Baltics, also in Latvia, there is still a feeling that if I need help, I should know someone in that particular institution. Because if I don't know a particular face, then I'm not sure if I can trust the institution. In Nordics, from my experience, the situation is different. It doesn't matter who you are. It does not matter if I know Sven or Jorgen or whomever in this
Maybe
institution.
it comes from our background in Soviet times. It
but
was
again,
always
strong,
had to know
accountable
someone to get
institutions, and do we have these strong, accountable institutions, and what should be done in order to have these strong, accountable institutions, and also transparency. So these are some fundamentals of trust building, and of course, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not granted to you. You have to, to prove that you are accountable and that you take care and that you work for including people and making them feel valued.
How is trust built in Lithuanian society?
Yeah, I will say it, but I want to make one more note regarding the language, which was said. We should always not forget the right to use the native language. So it's always like a opposite direction movement, because the state is also always, it's in the same happening in Lithuania, that it's somehow fostering the more and more the usage of the official state language, but at the same time, the state is responsible to keep the possibilities to use the native languages, and especially for the national minorities groups. So it's always like an opposite, and it's important not to forget that. Regarding the trust, so I totally agree with my colleague regarding the common goals and common initiatives, intercultural communication and learning. So it's a basic things that we can build it through, but it's always important how we are making that. It's easy to say that we all of us understand that it's important, but can the state somehow influence that? So of course yes, and there are special programs and special funds and possibilities which are focused on that goal, and we still keep it. For example, we even trying to involve the national minorities groups to be more active, thinking about the trust not between themselves, but also those people who arrived recently to the country, and somehow trying to make the conditions that could move them into communication with the new coming people more. So it's like a state policy for trust building between the people.
One thing, what happens with even, for example, the newcomers, if Ukrainians come to Estonia, they are starting to build these cultural bubbles. They have their own social media communities where they talk, where they get their news. They even use maybe only Ukrainian, I don't know, whatever you need, like friseur or whatever, you take it from your own community. And it's also helped by social media. Dmitri, what to do with these cultural and ideological bubbles?
Study them. No, I mean, admire them, and then, of course, also approach them through the, how you called it, diversity competence, right? Because there are different Ukrainians who come here. I mean, it would be wrong to assume that, I mean, obviously they are citizens of Ukraine, but they have their own experiences. I mean, they are different Ukrainians, and they might have different needs, different interests, different future prospects. And for that reason, why I answered, studied them to understand, are they going to be part of our society in the future? And then they learn the language and integrate or whatever we propose them to be part of our society and also labor market, or they will just wait for the victory and then they will return home, or they go, I don't know, to other country. So again, to understand, are we accepting them for long term, or what are their plans? So that's we could do.
How can shared spaces, for example, in a workplace, can be designed to encourage this cross-cultural dialogue, Agnese?
Well, cross-cultural dialogue, cross-cultural communication I would say that usually these are not, physical barriers. These are, the barrier is here. And we tend always to, put blame on those whom we perceive as others, but we have to remember that we are the ones who define what diversity is, because diversity is nothing objective. It's always subjectively constructed based on whom we perceive as others. So the first question is, why do I perceive specific persons as others and different? Why am I potentially afraid of them? Why am I not open to their perspectives? So everything starts with yourself. When we work with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it starts with you as a team leader or a manager, or you as a person. Approach critically yourself. Why do you perceive them as others? Very often there are much more similarities than differences, but we have these mental barriers, so it has usually nothing to do with physical barriers, unless we talk about physical disabilities. And so starting again, this diversity competence is alpha and omega. We have to start with diversity competence. So how we view the world, how we view specific people, why do we view them in that particular way? Focus on similarities, not on differences, but don't ignore differences. Be curious and understand that there is value in different approaches. And especially if it's within one organization, no one benefits from discrimination. No one, neither the state, neither the individual, neither the organization. Discrimination has extreme costs, both for labor market, for society, for organization, and also for individual. So inclusion, everyone earns by including others. So basically we have to strive for having, one big us, then several, us and them. And so we have to start with diversity competence, with removing mental barriers, promoting awareness, promoting insight, promoting understanding. Also what you said about studying them, it sounds simple, but it's not. We have to try to understand, we have to be willing to understand, and we have to understand that we can't be sustainable, competitive if we ignore differences and do not want to see this diversity as a value.
There is an audience question that fits here well. Dainius, how to make sure that state integration services take into account the cultural diversity of their users?
Well, we need data for that, and that's a true next challenge that we need. So calculating and getting the data about the cultural diversity is urgently important challenge, and actually it's even one of the first goals in the field of national minority policy at the moment, to gather more data, and based on that data to make more analysis, and because of that, start to implement the new policies and the new things that we can decide on that because of the data and because of the analysis that we got before. So that's probably and actually I even also want to add to the questions that were asked before. So those bubbles in the diverse society are a truly big issue and big challenge, and we clearly understand that sometimes even looking at that image that you showed us, Agnese, for us, sometimes we have the situation when there is no wall at all, or probably it stands not a wall, but it stands like a rock or something, and we cannot remove it, and it will be there. And sometimes people are standing not near the wall, but stand somewhere aside, and they even don't look that direction to the wall. They are extremely somewhere else. So to break those barriers, to break those bubbles, we need allies in a society. It means that the state cannot implement something directly on them, and we need allies in the national minorities. They are our capacity. We need the people and the communities which are close to those bubbles, and to interact through those communities, those people who are not involved. So that's very important.
Yeah,
just also a comment referring to those pictures, baseball pictures. You remember the fence. So this fence can also be a language. So if there is no, how can you communicate if there is not, if you don't have language proficiency to communicate with people? So it is a big barrier and it is a big challenge, and I have lived abroad myself and I know it is difficult to learn a foreign language. At the same time, there is no better way how to become a part of society as to learn language. So having language which, well, is mutually understood, and of course it promotes inclusive participation, and language barriers very often are exactly as these fences in these baseball pictures which I showed you. And also, of course, also Latvia is doing a lot, in offering language courses and Latvian language courses. But we also, it's not enough, to offer course. There also needs to be willingness to become a part of society and to learn language. And we all know that neither Estonian or Latvian or the Lithuanian, these are not large languages. You cannot use them anywhere else in the world. So you really have to be dedicated. And at the same time, I know many expats also from Nordic countries who have learned Latvian, proficiently, and they're fluent in Latvian. They working Latvians, they want to understand the employees and societies, they want to be part of society. So it's always also about willingness, why potentially you want or don't want to learn potential language, and also about the joint information space, and what information spaces people are actually living, what information they consume, and we know how we can manipulate this information. So media, communication, information is an extremely essential topic when we talk about risks and polarization in society.
The audience wants to know what is there beyond the national language, and what does integration mean beyond adopting a language? And maybe you can, each of you, give an example of a certain program or certain things that really have worked well. Dainius, let's start with you.
So the question is regarding the national state language, right?
Beyond, what else can be done beyond language to integrate the people in the society who are from national minorities?
Well, so definitely the language is just one step, and of course there are much more steps and ideas needed to proceed. So, well, getting special programs for the NGOs, let's say, for example, and special programs for the leaders of the NGOs. And it's very important near the language. Language is a part also of disinformation problem, and well, so the focus on disinformation and uprising the skills of the leaders of national minorities and critical thinking is also very important near to the language.
Dmitri?
Well, I would be happy, if they pay the taxes and if they follow our laws and respect, our traditions, but then again, what kind of problem we are solving here? I think kind of true integration would reflect also, let's say, political participation. That those people who think that they have some ideas to be implemented, that they run for elections.
So what is your thought on the recent topic? You don't want to reply to that.
That's already made a decision, and that was a political decision, and I think we should address that question to our smart politicians.
Yeah, I will just explain that in Estonia, the current discussion is about to take away Russian citizens who are permanently living in Estonia the right to vote at local elections. So that is the current topic. But we will ask later politicians about this. Agnese, what are your ideas beyond language?
Beyond language. Well, there are actually several ideas, and if you look at national level, you can also draw parallels, of course, on organizational level, because that is smaller scope, and it's somehow easier to make tangible this inclusion or integration processes. But what I liked, when we talk about inclusive leadership, we can talk about inclusive leadership both on company level and on national level. Very significant part of inclusive leadership is allyship, what you already mentioned. Allyship, it is very important. Also, different kind of mentoring services can be, mentors are very good thing for people who do not feel included or who have some possibility, some barriers for being included. It can not only necessarily culture, you know, if you look at it narrowly, but also disabilities and so on and so forth. But then what I would urge you to do is try to analyze yourself a situation where you have been a minority, and all of you have been minorities in different life situations. It doesn't mean that you must have lived abroad. You can be minority as a woman among men. You can be minority as a woman without children among women with children. You can be a minority as a man among, I don't know, as a man, as a student among professionals. So a situation where you have been a minority, and what exactly made you feel valued and what not, what empowered you and what did not. And just doing this exercise on yourself, analyze and be aware of what actually helps you to perform, what helps you to be valued when you are in a minority position. And then you can actually get many good lessons learned. And tomorrow, by the way, I have a workshop on diversity competence, and we will also in this workshop work on those skills. Yes, and now I'm, for example, reflecting on my own experiences. I have been thinking back, okay, how was it for me in Norway? When I arrived in Norway without knowing Norwegian, without knowing English, it was many years ago, without having any networks, having a foreign name, you know, and you know what? I really felt valued. I felt important. And then I have been analyzing what Norway did, or that particular environment where I was, what they did in order to make me feel important, make me feel valued. Of course, I learned language. There was offered to learn language courses. People showed interest in me. They involved me, you know, and I proceeded very quickly in my career. I learned language. I got my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD. I started to work at university, you know, and I analyzed step by step how was I treated as a, you know, foreigner, as someone from post-Soviet country, which maybe was not very highly valued, and just analyzing these steps. And then, for example, just some years ago, working in Middle East, not knowing Arabic, I understood very well how difficult, again, it is to perform, also because of my own prejudices, my own stereotypes, because when you are afraid, you cannot really work productively. And then you start to analyze, why am I afraid? Do I really have some bad experiences with these people? No, I don't, but mass media creates these images that makes us scared of people we don't know. So you have to, you know, use this critical thinking now I'm talking perhaps very broadly, but I'm referring back to my experiences, in what context I have felt I am empowered because of my diversity, and in context where I have felt quite the opposite, and what people around me did in order to make me feel, and also institutions to make me feel empowered. And regarding Middle East, even without knowing Arabic language, when I managed to overcome, I have to admit, my own bias, stereotypes and my own fear, I understood that I can actually start to work productively, and I also have to value my own diversity and be confident about who I am. So it's two-way road. I mean, you know, it's not one-way direction. If we want to, you need to want to be included and integrated, and the other party also needs to do something in order to help you to be included. So it's always mutual. It's always relational process. You know, at least two parties are needed to include.
You already spoke about stereotypes, biased views, and the audience also wants to know a bit more about this. How politicians are using these minority groups to gain their political victories. Dmitri.
Well, there are people here in the audience who are, of course, are very much aware about how our brilliant politicians can do it.
How problematic it is.
It is problematic, absolutely. It is problematic that it's also artificially created division that is being used from one election to another election. And I don't know, will I see the end of it? I mean,
Probably not, as long as
as far as I remember,
can be calculated to ballots.
This so-called Russian card is being played on every elections, and it's shame, really. I mean, because as long as we vote for those politicians who play this Russian card, as long this kind of bad tradition continues. So I think we need to also educate our politicians about cultural diversity and about diversity competence. Not just citizens and not just media, but also our politicians, that populistic rhetoric actually splits society, that populistic rhetoric actually is counterproductive, and in terms of crisis, our society will be less resilient if we trust our votes for populistic politicians who play again these ethnic minority cards.
Dainius? Oh, it doesn't work.
Yeah. So, well, it is. It is a huge challenge, and even actually at the moment in Lithuania we have an issue because of the anti-Semitic some speeches which were spoken by the politicians, and now those populists, even they are getting into the not just into the parliament but also in the leading coalition, and they are going to rule the country. But they're always thinking and saying that let's try to use those things as a possibility and advantage to create something out of it. And at the same moment, there are always possible to get the allies and to implement something new and to have good arguments for that. So even at the same moment when the politicians are using stereotypes, making populistic speeches and even anti-Semitic speeches, so there are always possibility to get people, let's make a new plan, let's make a new strategy, let's make something on that. And it actually happens. If someone gathering together, if they are putting their energy together, so it's always possible to get something good out of it.
Agnese, would you like to add, or do you have some mechanisms that actually can promote this dialogue between politicians?
Yeah, well, of course, diversity, competence at national level, of course, it is definitely needed. But I have one quote, actually, I have written it down, which I think it's not only about Baltics, you know, it's about politics in general. There is this famous American professor, Noam Chomsky, linguist, and he says that if you want to conquer people, create an imaginary enemy who seems more dangerous than you, and then be the savior. So what we see in politics in many places in the world, you create these imaginary enemies who are more dangerous than yourself, and then you pretend to be the savior. And this is something also how we create these enormous biases and stereotypes. We categorize, we don't apply our critical thinking. I also call stereotypes for energy saving devices exactly because stereotypes offer us a very simple scheme how to treat different people, because we presume, oh, those, let's say Ukrainians are like this, Latvians like this, Estonians like this, and this is also the danger of using only the concept of cultural diversity as if people were, you know, like homogeneous boxes, but they are not. You know, when we have highlighted here in many sentences that, of course, not all Estonians, not all Ukrainians, not all Latvians are the same. We are very diverse and we have different needs. And also, when you asked me about cross-cultural interaction, you know, we should maybe rather talk about how do we interact between introvert and extrovert people. It would be even better questions than to ask how we communicate across cultures, because being introvert or extrovert has even more impact than having different cultures, because I assume that you as Estonian and me as Latvian, we would not have big barriers in communicating. But if I was very introvert and you were very extrovert, then maybe it would be difficult. Who knows? So this by stereotyping, sometimes on purpose, by not using our critical thinking, by not having diversity competence, sometimes even on purpose we create these imaginary enemies, and then we pretend to be a savior, and this is how we, you know, try to get to increase our popularity. And it's not only about national or ethnic divides. I remember, I assume also you remember during COVID times, I think during COVID those were the first elections, at least in Latvia, when suddenly it was not national lines anymore who played most role, but whether you support the vaccination or not. And it was really the biggest, divide in elections. For which party you would vote? Either you support vaccination against COVID, or you are, how we called it in everyday language, is anti-vaxxer. So again, and then again you create this imaginary enemy, when you just enforce these fears in society.
But if we talk about national security and geopolitics, Dmitri, I'm looking again at you. I'm afraid to ask questions. Maybe you don't want to reply. But is there a divide between the people's nationality, how they, for example, understand the war in Ukraine? I thought that you didn't want to reply.
Unfortunately, it is. But there's a very important but. There are people, of course, who might support Russia's war against Ukraine. And these people might live in different countries and in different places. So there's no, let's say, universal determinator that those people should speak whatever language or whatever ethnic background they have. Unfortunately, again, there are some people, also in Estonia, who really might support the war. And on whatever reasons they do that. And that's the problem. The question is, again, what we do with these people. Obviously, we don't trust them.
But what happens when there is a real crisis, as you spoke?
Exactly. That's the question, and that's the solution we are looking for. What to do with the people who we don't trust. So we have lived here for more than 30 years after re-establishment of independence, and we always knew that there are some people among us we don't trust. So how to measure it, what to do with it? Is it the crisis that could unite us, or we are going to again look for, let's say, internal enemies? And all that kind of discussions that we are constantly trying to find a solution without being successful. Because today we can say that we, let's say, don't trust this group. Tomorrow we can say that, okay, we don't trust another group, as actually happened during COVID crisis. That there were some people among us we also didn't trust, whatever, anti-vaxxers and so on. As actually happened during the elections, that, let's say, pro-liberal forces and those who protected so-called traditional values, they also didn't trust each other. So, that's the knowledge we have to live with, that society is really diverse, and unfortunately there are some people who support the aggression on whatever reason. So we can speculate that they have been brainwashed by the Kremlin's propaganda, and probably they were. We can see that maybe they feel the perception that they feel offended by some decisions of the Estonian state in the past, so therefore they support Putin. I don't know, but that's the reality, and that's also part of diversity. So our task is again to protect the values we share in our society. That those people who support aggression, that they won't dictate their agenda to the majority, and so we preserve safety and security within our country. I think that is our task.
Dainius?
First of all, of course, that the geopolitical issues, it shapes the diversity in the country. That's for sure. But it's not just about Ukraine. It's not just about this case, because it also shapes the same in connection to the Palestine and Israel conflict. It's also about all the other cases, like there are people who are for the Trump in America, and the people who think opposite, and it's always like this. And I'm always thinking that it's every time it's not about just two parties. It's always it's like a line of people, and there are people who support, as you said. There are people who just have opinion, and there are people who think somehow in the middle. They are not sure to which side they can move, and probably it's sometimes it's even not between those sides, but a little bit aside of it. So diversity is much more complicated in that case. And of course, if it's really close to the security of the state, if it's connected with our common defense, so of course the state should somehow move proactively and to implement something, and it's always connected with the same disinformation and our policies, what we do for the disinformation, what are our strengths and possibilities to change the situation and to make more objective possibilities to get there. How we deal with our own media, how we deal with the media that comes from the foreign countries. It's always important to know the reasons why people are in one or another side.
Agnese, would you like to add on this topic?
Yeah, there is a lot to say. I'm just trying to figure out how I can be brief. Well, because it is a very complex topic, and there is not one right, solution. And at the same time, of course, there are no, as I say, when it comes to diversity management strategies, there are no copy-paste solutions, because you need to understand particular context. Everything needs to be based on your data, on your context, and what again you said about study those groups. Again, we have to understand how people think. We have to understand what's happening in their minds. And no, I haven't. Well, in my previous job, I worked a lot as a researcher, and I remember also when a couple of years ago, there was also a survey, for example, in Latvia, where there were questions: do you condemn Russia's attack to Ukraine? And then I think like 99.9% Latvians responded of yes, they do condemn. And then there were very few Russians, I don't remember numbers, by heart, who said that they do not condemn. But then there was a large part actually who didn't answer anything. So there is a grey mass and we don't know what they think. Either they're afraid to say that they condemn or that they don't. Maybe they're confused, regarding their identities. And the fact that we do not know what they think is a problem. We should know what they think. And again, you cannot understand what they think if you, stop communicating, if you exclude. But again, at the same time, of course, there are red lines. Freedom of speech is not hate speech is not freedom of speech. If national security is being threatened, then measure has to be taken. So it's extremely complex and large topic, but we have to understand what people think.
But is there a role of economic wellness as well, that at least in Estonia, if you look at the population, if you go to the eastern part of Estonia, they are not so well off as, for example, in other parts, that the Russian minority is somehow in worse situation in economic state, and that's why they are not so loyal as well.
Oh, well, sorry to disappoint you, I don't have this data in my head. But if we look at discrimination in labor market in Latvia, then we see that those social groups that are mostly discriminated against are, number one, there is age discrimination, so employees are discriminated based on their age, and 50+ category is in a worst position, and we actually did a survey also from PricewaterhouseCoopers Latvia in cooperation with the recruitment company Alma Career Latvia this summer, and we were surveying age discrimination manifestations in our labor market, and only 3% of employees said that they have not experienced age discrimination, and there were only 10% of employers who admitted that they don't discriminate. So basically 90% they admit that to some extent they do discriminate based on age. At the same time, there is extreme lack of human resources, and we have these very capable, smart, experienced 50+ people who are being discriminated against. So that is number one, most discriminated group in labor market. Number two is the people with health issues. It can be disabilities, either visible or not visible. You know, it can be health issues. So basically, it's not ethnic. Discrimination in labor market is not as much based on, for example, ethnic lines, much less than on age and health and disabilities.
Now I have a personal question to each of you from the audience. I will start, Dainius, with you. Can you address the case of immigrant community in Lithuania who arrived as a result of Lukashenko's orchestrated border crisis? Can you explain what happened there?
Well, first of all, of course, Lithuania was very open and very keen to support the revolution which happened in Belarus and in Minsk. So even the society was very acceptable and so on. But actually, later on, it changed a little bit, and already now we see that there are appearing the provocative actions, and we're trying somehow to react fast and to say our own opinion on that. The state position, which is basically to get Belarusian people included into the society and to keep them possibility stay in our country. Well, even we have some special cases that happened recently. There were some writings and some messages written on the walls, and it was a big need to go to the community and to talk to them, to explain the state position and how do we feel about that. So well, there are issues, but we're trying the best.
To Dmitri, do you have an example of a country where the diverse or integrated society meant society reacted well to crisis?
No.
That was a short answer.
No. I mean, again, every country, every society is quite unique and obviously has its strengths and vulnerabilities. Well, Agnese provided example of Nordic countries, and that's our wishful thinking here, that one day we also can become one. By taxation, hopefully. But again, it's how you perceive your threats and then how you react on them. And then another important component that's actually, I think, well developed in Nordic countries is shared determination. Basically, how you perceived your future prospects. What you're going to do with the future. In Estonia, I think we were on a quite successful track with our IT, digital, and everything E-related. I think it's something which inspired us, at least for some time, something which gave us kind of positive mobilization, and actually positively united also language communities for some time. But then somehow we lost that spark, and now I think, maybe not the right time, but still we are looking for another idea, another kind of shared determination or future credible prospects that could mobilize us. But that's again unique because each country should have own solutions.
To Agnese, how to evaluate diversity competence for a person or organization? Is there any tools for that?
Yes, there are tools. I will tell about more about. We will work. If you are interested in that, you can join my workshop tomorrow in program. I don't remember what time it is, but we will talk about because it's not well. Of course, there are ways how you can evaluate diversity maturity, diversity competence, and that is something I always advise a company to start with. Once they set their focus on diversity and inclusion, you need to understand where they are and where you want to proceed with this. Without that, there will not be, strategic, fruitful work. Yeah, I don't know if I answered, but yes, tomorrow, welcome to my workshop, and we will work on diversity competence.
And for the closing marks, shortly, each of you, please tell what is most important for the future to build social cohesion, to make our society stronger. Dainius, let's start with you.
Well, there are many points, but let's say from my side, from my perspective, so I think that understanding, it means data and data using for the policy.
Dmitri?
Well, first of all, take care of yourself. That's the first rule, which resilience begins from yourself. You are agent of resilience together. And then also take care of those you love. Basically your close community, is it family, friends, or whatever you care about. And that kind of network would help you to survive a crisis. So your own strength, care yourself, and then care for your closer community.
Agnese?
Yeah, 4 letters, MMFI. These are actually, it's a short abbreviation which I have written down also on my office wall and also at home. It means make me feel important. So if this attitude does not cost anything, often organizations say, we don't have money to invest in diversity and inclusion. MMFI, make me feel important. If you apply this attitude in your everyday interaction with people around you, with people whom you work with people whom you interact, if a person feels valued and important, you will see miracles will happen. He will be more motivated, more productive, he will feel more included, he will feel more belonging. And this actually, I have to tell that I got inspired by these 4 letters when I was working closely with Norwegian Correctional Services, and this is what they taught me. When they work with people who are, who have finished serving their sentence and they need to re-socialize in society, it's not a simple task. And then these 4 letters, if you make them feel valued and important, then this re-socialization and becoming a good part of society, becoming good citizen again, it really plays a huge role. So MMFI, make me feel important, make me feel valued, apply this attitude at home, at work, at school, and you see miracles will happen. You know how people behave and to what extent they feel more included and belonging.
We value all you speakers a lot. Please make a round of applause. Thank you all.